The war room fell silent as another star system disappeared from the holographic display. Admiral Thessa watched the red marker fade to black, her 4 compound eyes reflecting the dying light. That made 17 systems lost in the past month alone, 17 worlds where millions of coalition citizens had lived, worked, and dreamed of peace. Now they were gone, consumed by the Krell Dominion. Thessa's chitinous exoskeleton clicked softly as she moved around the circular table. The other members of the War Council sat in their designated positions, representing the 6 species that made up the Galactic Coalition. They had fought together for 47 years. They had bled together, suffered together, and slowly, inevitably, they were losing together. "The Krell advance continues," said Commander Vex, his scaled face impassive. The reptilian Saurian had seen more battles than anyone else in the room. "Our projections show they will reach the core worlds within 2 years. Maybe less." 2 years, repeated Minister Kona, the Aquarian representative. Her blue skin seemed to pale even further. "That's not enough time to evacuate even a fraction of our populations." Thessa felt the weight of those words. The coalition had been powerful once. 6 species, each advanced in their own way, coming together to explore the galaxy and spread peace. They had gravitic shields that could bend space itself. They had antimatter reactors that powered ships faster than light. They had psionic warriors who could link minds across star systems. But the Krell had numbers. Endless numbers. And their bioengineered war beasts seemed to multiply with every battle. The coalition won tactical victories, but the Krell won the war of attrition. For every Krell ship destroyed, 3 more appeared. For every world defended, 2 more fell. "There must be something we can do," said General Torvik, slamming his massive fist on the table. The bear-like Ursinian's fur bristled with frustration. "Some weapon we haven't deployed. Some tactic we haven't tried." "We've tried everything," Vex replied quietly. "Everything we know." The door to the war room suddenly chimed. Thessa's antennae twitched in surprise. They were in the middle of a classified strategy session. No interruptions were permitted. "Enter," she said, her translator converting her clicking mandibles into standard Galactic. A young Varani officer burst in, his wings fluttering with obvious anxiety. "Admiral, forgive the intrusion, but there's a diplomatic vessel requesting immediate audience with the War Council." "Now?" Thessa's voice carried her irritation. "Tell them to file proper channels." "They did, Admiral. 3 months ago. You denied the request." The officer paused. "They're human." The room went quiet again, but this time with a different energy. Humans, the newest species to stumble onto the galactic stage. They had been discovered only 20 years ago on the far rim of known space, still using primitive chemical rockets to explore their own solar system. "Why would humans request an audience with the War Council?" asked Minister Kona. "I believe," said the officer nervously, "they want to help with the war." Several council members made sounds that their translators interpreted as laughter or disbelief. Help. The humans were barely spacefaring. Their fastest ships couldn't break light speed. They had no gravitic technology, no antimatter, no psionic abilities. They were, by every measure the coalition used, centuries away from being ready for galactic affairs. "Send them away politely," Thessa said. "We have no time for symbolic gestures." "Admiral," the officer pressed, "they've been waiting for 6 hours. The human ambassador says she won't leave until you hear her message." Thessa's mandibles clicked in annoyance, but something in the officer's tone made her pause. "Very well. 5 minutes. No more." The human who entered the war room was small by galactic standards. She stood perhaps 1.7 meters tall, with brown skin and dark hair tied back in a simple style. She wore a plain blue uniform with minimal decoration. Everything about her appearance suggested a species that was practical, efficient, and young. Ambassador Maria Chen bowed slightly to the assembled council. "Thank you for seeing me, Admiral," members of the council. "I know your time is precious." "You have 5 minutes, Ambassador," Thessa said. "Speak." Chen walked to the holographic display, studying the map of the war. Red Krell territory spread like a cancer across one side of the galaxy. Blue Coalition space seemed to shrink even as they watched. "We know you're losing," Chen said simply. "We've been monitoring your broadcasts, studying your battles. The Krell will reach your core worlds in less than 2 years. Without help, the Coalition will fall." "We appreciate your concern," Vex said with barely concealed condescension. "But humanity is not yet ready to involve itself in galactic conflicts. Your technology is insufficient. Your numbers are small. You have one world and a handful of outposts. What could you possibly offer? Chen turned to face him directly. Everything, the word hung in the air. Minister Kona leaned forward. Ambassador, please understand. We don't question your courage. But this war requires capabilities your species simply doesn't possess. You don't have shields. You don't have antimatter weapons. You don't have FTL drives beyond the most basic models we sold you. You're right, Chen agreed. We don't have those things, but we have something else. Something you need more than advanced technology. And what is that? Asked Thessa. Experience, General Torvik snorted. Experience? You've been in space for barely 4 centuries. We've been spacefaring for over 12,000 years. Chen's expression didn't change. How many wars has the Coalition fought? The question caught them off guard. Vex answered first. The Coalition has been involved in 3 major conflicts since its founding. Several minor skirmishes. We are explorers and diplomats first, warriors only when necessary. Humanity has fought approximately 15,000 wars in our recorded history, Chen said quietly. We've had conflicts on every scale imaginable. Wars over resources, ideology, religion, territory, revenge. Wars that lasted days and wars that lasted generations. We've fought with rocks and spears. We've fought with chemical weapons and nuclear bombs. We've fought in trenches in the sky, in the ocean, and in space. She paused, letting that sink in. We've been killing each other efficiently for our entire existence. We learned tactics that your species never needed to develop. We understand logistics, strategy, and the brutal mathematics of warfare in ways that peaceful civilizations don't. And about 200 years ago, we stopped fighting each other and started asking a different question. What question? Thessa asked despite herself. What happens when we meet something out there that wants to kill us? Chen gestured to the stars beyond the window. We've been expecting you. All of you. We've been preparing for first contact since we first looked up at the night sky. We built weapons. We ran simulations. We planned for every scenario we could imagine. You prepared for war, Kona said, and there was something like horror in her voice. We prepared for survival, Chen corrected. There's a saying from old Earth, if you want peace, prepare for war. We wanted peace. We hoped for peace, but we prepared for the alternative. General Torvik stood, his massive frame towering over the human. Even if what you say is true, what can you offer? One species against the Krell Dominion? We offer one ship, Chen said. One crew. Let us fight alongside you. Let us show you what we can do. If we fail, you've lost nothing. If we succeed, she smiled slightly, you might learn something. One ship, Vex repeated. Against the Krell Armada. One ship, Chen confirmed. For now. If it proves effective, we have more in production. Many more. Thessa looked around the table. They were desperate. That was the truth of it. The Coalition was dying, and desperate people considered desperate options. A human ship would be useless in any strategic sense, but perhaps as a gesture of unity, it might boost morale. And if it failed, when it failed, they could at least say they tried everything. Very well, Ambassador, Thessa said finally. Send your ship. We'll integrate it into our defense fleet, but understand that we cannot guarantee its safety. The Krell show no mercy. We don't expect mercy, Chen said. We never have. She was turning to leave when the warning klaxons screamed throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red. Every screen in the war room switched to incoming transmissions. A Coalition frigate appeared on screen, its hull scarred and smoking. The captain's face was streaked with blood. This is Captain Moros of the frigate Defender. Tertius Prime is under attack. Krell forces. Static consumed the transmission. Another voice broke through. This is Tertius Prime ground control. We have 150 Krell warships in orbit. They're launching drop pods. We need immediate assistance. Tertius Prime, one of the Coalition's largest manufacturing hubs. Millions of civilians. Dozens of factories producing ships and weapons. If it fell, the Coalition's ability to replace losses would be crippled. Thessa pulled up tactical data. How many ships do we have in range? 23, Vex reported. Mostly frigates and destroyers. Light cruisers at best. Against 150 Krell warship, he didn't need to finish. Send everyone we have, Thessa ordered. Evacuate as many civilians as possible. We'll hold them as long as we can. Admiral, Chen's voice cut through the chaos. How long would it take us to reach Tertius Prime? Thessa turned. She'd forgotten the human was still there. 18 hours at maximum coalition speed. Why? Because the USS Blackstar is currently in the Sigma sector. We can be there in 12 hours. One human ship won't make a difference, Vex said, but his voice lacked conviction. Chen smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Thessa's antennae twitch. With an unfamiliar emotion, it took her a moment to recognize it. Fear. You'd be surprised what one human ship can do, Chen said, especially when we're angry. She touched her communication device. Ambassador Chen to USS Blackstar. Captain Hawthorne, are you receiving? A woman's voice crackled through the comm. Loud and clear, Ambassador. We've been monitoring coalition channels. Tertius Prime? Confirmed. 150 Krell warships. Millions of civilians. Can you intercept? There was a pause. Then Captain Hawthorne's voice came back, and it carried a tone that reminded Thessa of General Torvik before a battle. Eager, focused, and utterly without fear. We can be there in 12 hours. Tell the coalition forces to stay clear of the primary battle space. Things are going to get messy. Acknowledged, Captain. Chen out. The ambassador looked at Thessa. You wanted to see what we can do, Admiral. In 12 hours, you'll have your answer. She left the war room, moving with purpose. The council members looked at each other in confusion. One ship. One human ship against 150 Krell warships. It was insanity. Young Officer Kessex approached Admiral Thessa hesitantly. Admiral, permission to speak? Granted. I'd like to volunteer as an observer aboard the human ship. Standard protocol for Allied vessels. But his voice carried something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or the hope that comes from having no other options. Thessa studied him. Kessex was young, brilliant, and had never seen real combat. In 12 hours, that would change. Permission granted, she said. May the stars guide you, Kessex. He saluted and left quickly to arrange transport. The war room fell silent again as they all stared at the holographic display. Tertius Prime flickered, under siege. 23 coalition ships rushed to its defense, and somewhere in the darkness of space, a human warship altered course, heading toward a battle it couldn't possibly win. Admiral Thessa wondered if she'd just sent the young Varani officer to his death. She wondered if this human ship would even reach Tertius Prime before the planet fell. She wondered what these strange warlike humans had built in their isolated corner of the galaxy. In 12 hours, she would find out. The waiting began. The first thing Kessex noticed about the human ship was that it looked wrong. Every coalition vessel he'd ever seen followed the same basic principles. Smooth hulls designed to minimize sensor signatures, elegant curves that helped gravitic shields distribute energy impacts, translucent sections where antimatter reactors glowed with barely contained power. Coalition ships were beautiful in their way, built by species that valued art as much as function. The USS Blackstar looked like someone had designed it to kill things and hadn't cared about anything else. It was massive, 2 full kilometers from bow to stern. But where it should have been sleek, it was angular. Where it should have gleamed, it was black as the void itself. The hull wasn't smooth, energy-resistant alloy. It was covered in thick, overlapping plates that reminded Kessex of ancient armor. Dozens of turrets bristled from every surface. The engines at the rear glowed with a dull red light that seemed primitive compared to the bright blue of antimatter drives. The shuttle carrying Kessex approached a docking bay on the starboard side. Through the viewport, he could see more details. Scorch marks covered sections of the hull. Some of the armor plates showed deep gouges. This ship had seen combat before and recently. Ugly, isn't it? Said the human pilot, a young woman with short blonde hair. I didn't say that, Kessex replied quickly, worried he'd offended. The pilot laughed. Don't worry. We call her the Flying Brick ourselves. She's not pretty, but she's tough. You'll see. The shuttle passed through an atmospheric containment field and landed in a cavernous bay. Kessex was immediately struck by how different it felt from coalition ships. The walls were bare metal. The deck was marked with painted lines and warning symbols. Crews in gray uniforms moved with quick efficiency, loading crates and running diagnostics on smaller craft. It reminded him more of a factory than a starship. A tall woman in a dark blue uniform approached as Kessex descended the shuttle ramp. She had brown hair pulled back tightly, sharp green eyes, and moved with an economy of motion that suggested military discipline. A name tag on her chest read Hawthorne. Officer Kessex, she said, extending her hand. I'm Captain Elizabeth Hawthorne. Welcome aboard the Blackstar. Kessex knew about human handshaking customs from his briefings. He took her hand, feeling the strength in her grip. Thank you for allowing me to observe, Captain. Call me Hawthorne. Everyone does. She started walking, and Kessex hurried to keep up. I'll be honest with you, Kessex. The next few hours are going to be intense. You'll see things that might seem strange or even brutal compared to coalition warfare. If you need to leave at any point, just say so. No judgment. I'll be fine, Kessex said, though his wings fluttered nervously. They entered a lift that moved swiftly through the ship. Hawthorne explained as they traveled. The Blackstar is what we call a dreadnought. Heavy armor, heavy weapons designed to take damage and keep fighting. We've got a crew of 3,000, all volunteers. Most have served in Earth's military forces at some point. 3,000 seems like a lot for a single ship, Kessex observed. Automation is great until it fails. We prefer redundancy, humans who can think, adapt, and fix things when they break. The lift stopped at the bridge level, and trust me, things are going to break. The bridge of the Blackstar was nothing like the elegant, open command centers of coalition vessels. It was cramped, dimly lit, with crew members seated at workstations that looked bolted directly into the floor. Screens covered every surface, displaying data in formats Kessex didn't recognize. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and something else. Coffee, Hawthorne called it, a human stimulant drink. Captain on deck, someone called, but no one stood or saluted. They just kept working. Status, Hawthorne said, settling into a chair that looked more functional than comfortable. 6 hours from Tertius Prime, reported a man at the navigation station. Coalition forces are engaged. Current count shows 19 coalition ships still active. Krell forces still at 147. They're doing better than expected, Hawthorne said. Tactical, what's our battle plan? A woman at the weapons station pulled up a holographic display. Krell formation is clustered around the planet. They're using their bioships to tank coalition fire, while the smaller vessels bombard the surface. Standard Krell doctrine. Weaknesses. Their shields are strong against energy weapons, but they've never faced kinetic bombardment at relativistic speeds. Their bioships regenerate, but catastrophic structural damage should overwhelm their healing. And their coordination relies on psionic communication. Electromagnetic interference might disrupt that. Kessex listened, trying to understand. Excuse me, but what are kinetic weapons? Several crew members turned to look at him. Hawthorne smiled. We throw things really, really fast. No energy shields, no plasma, just solid mass at extreme velocity, but that's... Kessex searched for the right word. That's primitive. Physics is physics, the tactical officer said. Mass times velocity equals force. Simple, reliable, and very hard to defend against if you've never encountered it. Hawthorne stood as they entered Tertius Prime system. Through the main viewport, Kessex could see the battle in the distance. Explosions blossomed silently in the void. Coalition ships, their elegant forms marred by damage, danced around the larger Krell vessels. The Krell bioships looked like massive chitinous insects, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescence. All hands. Battle stations. Hawthorne announced calmly. Load all railguns, prep missile tubes 1 through 40, set reactors to combat power. This is not a drill. Klaxons sounded throughout the ship. Kessex felt the vibration through the deck as systems came online. The ship seemed to wake up around him, transforming from a transport into a weapon. Coalition frequency put me through, Hawthorne said. A moment later, a voice crackled over the speakers. It was Admiral Thessa. Human vessel, we read you. Be advised, you are entering an active combat zone. Krell forces have us outnumbered 7-1. We recommend you maintain distance and provide support fire only. Negative, Admiral, Hawthorne replied. We're going in. Recommend your forces pull back 300 kilometers. Pull back? Captain, we're barely holding them now. Pull back, Hawthorne repeated, and there was steel in her voice. In 2 minutes, this entire grid is going to become a kill zone. I don't want to hit friendlies. There was a pause. Then Thessa's voice, uncertain. Acknowledged. Coalition forces fall back to defensive position Beta. Kessex watched the tactical display as the coalition ships began to retreat. The Krell, sensing weakness, pressed forward. Their formation tightened, pursuing what they thought was a defeated enemy. Perfect, Hawthorne muttered. Tactical, how many in that cluster? 73 ships. They're grouped within a 5-kilometer radius. Target-rich environment. Hawthorne sat forward. Railguns lock onto the largest bioships. Fire on my mark. Missiles prep a full-spread nuclear warheads. Engineering house our ablative armor. Forward sections at 100%, Captain. Good. We're going to need it. Hawthorne took a breath. All stations confirm ready. One by one, the crew members reported in. Keswick felt his pulse quicken. The Blackstar was accelerating now, heading straight toward the Krell formation. Straight toward certain death, Captain, Keswick said hesitantly. Shouldn't we use evasive maneuvers? Hawthorne glanced at him. We're not built to dodge. We're built to take the hit and hit back harder. She turned to the weapons officer. Railguns fire, the ship shuddered. Through the viewport, Keswick saw tracers streak toward the Krell lines, except they weren't energy beams. They were solid projectiles, moving so fast they glowed from atmospheric friction. The math hit Keswick a second later. If the weapons officer had mentioned relativistic speeds, that meant the first tungsten rod struck a Krell bioship at 40% light speed. The explosion was like a miniature sun being born. The kinetic energy released was beyond anything Keswick had seen in coalition warfare. The bioship didn't just explode, it vaporized. The shockwave rippled outward, slamming into nearby vessels, cracking their organic hulls. 3 more shots. 3 more detonations. 4 Krell ships gone in seconds. They're moving to intercept us, the tactical officer reported. 20 vessels breaking formation. Let them come, Hawthorne said. Missiles away. The Blackstar shuddered again as dozens of missiles launched from concealed tubes. These weren't the guided antimatter torpedoes the Coalition used. These were long, cylindrical objects with massive engines strapped to them. Torch missiles, Hawthorne called them. Nuclear reactors pushing them to speeds that would tear apart anything less robust. The Krell ships fired back. Energy beams lanced across space, striking the Blackstar's hull. But instead of the shields flickering and dispersing the energy, the beams simply burned into the armor. The thick plates glowed red, then white, then ablated away in clouds of vaporized metal. Forward armor at 70%, someone reported. Acceptable, Hawthorne said calmly, as if losing 30% of their protection was routine. The torch missiles reached the Krell formation and detonated. Not near the ships, inside the formation. Keswick realized with horror that the missiles were tipped with nuclear warheads. 50 megaton yields, detonating in rapid sequence. The electromagnetic pulse washed over the Krell fleet. Their shields held they were designed to stop energy weapons. But something else happened. The bioships began to twitch and spasm. Their bioluminescence flickered. Several crashed into each other as their coordination failed. What's happening to them? Keswick asked. Their ships use organic neural networks for control, Hawthorne explained. EMP doesn't just fry electronics. It disrupts biological electrical signals, too. Their shields stop the blast, but not the radiation. That's... Keswick struggled for words. That's brutal. That's war, Hawthorne corrected. She stood. Helm, take us into the formation. All weapons, free fire. I want every gun on this ship shooting. The Blackstar plunged into the Krell fleet like an ancient warship sailing into enemy waters. And then, impossibly, every weapon on the human dreadnought opened fire at once. Railguns hammered out tungsten rods. Missile tubes launched a continuous stream of warheads. Point defense cannons, rapid-fire projectile weapons created a storm of metal around the ship. Even weapons Keswick didn't recognize began firing. Lasers for point defense, plasma cutters for close range, and something the crew called coil guns that accelerated ferrous slugs using magnetic fields. The Blackstar didn't fight like a coalition ship, using precision strikes and tactical positioning. It fought like a berserker, weapons blazing from every angle, armor ablating under enemy fire, pushing deeper into the enemy formation. It fought the way Keswick imagined ancient warriors must have fought, brutal, direct, accepting wounds to deliver killing blows. A Krell cruiser came alongside, trying to board. The Blackstar's point defense shredded the boarding craft, then fired a broadside of missiles at point-blank range. The cruiser broke in half. Krell dreadnought emerging from hyperspace, tactical warned. It's twice our size. Keswick looked at the display. The Krell dreadnought was enormous, bristling with organic weapon pods and surrounded by a shield that glowed with sickly green light. Hawthorne didn't hesitate. Set course. Ram speed, Captain. Even the experienced crew seemed shocked. You heard me. All power to forward sections. Engineering angle the armor plates to maximize deflection. If we're going to die, we're taking that bastard with us. The Blackstar turned, accelerating straight toward the massive dreadnought. Every remaining weapon fired at the target, trying to weaken its shields. The Krell ship returned fire with its planet killer. Weapon, a beam of concentrated energy that could crack worlds. The beam struck the Blackstar. Head-on, the forward armor didn't just ablate, it burned away in sheets. The outer hull turned to plasma. The second layer glowed white-hot. Kessex could see on the internal monitors as entire forward compartments vented to space. Crew members died instantly, burned away by the terrible energy. But the Blackstar kept coming. 400 dead, then 600. The number climbed on Kessex's display as he watched in horror. How could they keep fighting? How could Hawthorne keep giving orders as her people died? Distance to target 2 kilometers, the helm reported, voice steady despite the carnage. 1 kilometer, 500 meters. Tactical, Hawthorne said quietly. Activate Helios. Helios active. The viewport darkened automatically. Through the polarized glass, Kessex saw something rising from the center of the Blackstar's spine, a weapon that had been hidden in the ship's superstructure. What is that? He whispered. Directed energy weapon, Hawthorne said. Project Helios. We detonate a hydrogen bomb in a containment chamber, then channel the X-ray radiation through focusing mirrors. It only fires once because the weapon destroys itself in the process. But for that one shot, the Blackstar fired Helios at point-blank range. The beam that struck the Krell dreadnought wasn't a laser. It was concentrated fury. X-ray radiation at intensities that shouldn't exist outside stellar cores. The Krell shields were designed to stop conventional energy weapons. They weren't designed for this. The beam punched through the shields, through the organic hull, through the internal structure. The thermal shock was so intense that the bioship's regenerative systems couldn't even begin to cope. Cells exploded. Fluids boiled. The structural integrity failed along the entire path of the beam. The Krell dreadnought split in half. Both pieces drifted apart, fluids and atmosphere venting into space. The remaining Krell fleet, seeing their largest vessel destroyed, began to retreat. The surviving coalition ships, emboldened, pressed forward. The battle turned. Kessex stood on the bridge of the Blackstar, surrounded by celebrating humans, and felt only shock. He looked at the casualty report. 412 dead. Entire sections of the ship were uninhabitable. The forward armor was gone, but they'd won. Captain Hawthorne stood at the viewport watching the Krell flee. Her expression was grim, not triumphant. You sacrificed so many, Kessex said quietly. 400 people. Hawthorne turned to look at him. That's fewer than we lost taking Berlin, or Iwo Jima, or Normandy. She gestured to the stars. Officer Kessex, do you know what we learned in all those wars on Earth? We learned that if you're going to fight, you fight to win, not to look good, not to minimize casualties. You fight to end it. But the cost of losing would have been higher. Hawthorne moved back to her chair. Communications, open a channel to Admiral Thessa. A moment later, Thessa's image appeared. Her compound eyes were wide with shock. Captain Hawthorne, we monitored the battle. Those tactics, those weapons. That was effective? Hawthorne suggested. Terrifying, Thessa finished. You won, but your ship is heavily damaged. Your casualties are acceptable, Hawthorne interrupted. Admiral, with respect, this is what human warfare looks like. We don't fight clean. We don't fight fair. We fight to survive. Thessa was quiet for a moment. Then, the Coalition owes you a debt, Captain. Tertius Prime is secure. The manufacturing facilities are safe. You saved millions of lives. We did our job. Hawthorne glanced at the casualty list, and 412 of my crew did theirs. Request permission to transfer their bodies to Coalition facilities for proper ceremony. Granted, with full military honors. The transmission ended. The bridge crew began damage control procedures. Kessex stood in the middle of it all, trying to process what he'd seen. One human ship, one battle, and everything he thought he knew about warfare had changed. In the distance, Coalition ships moved to secure Tertius Prime. But somewhere in the dark reaches of Krell space, intelligence officers were already analyzing the battle. Already sending reports to their Empress. Already learning that a new threat had entered the war. A threat that fought like nothing they'd ever encountered. The USS Blackstar limped toward the nearest repair station, its hull scarred and bleeding atmosphere. But it was alive, and so was humanity's reputation. The memorial service was held 3 days after the Battle of Tertius Prime. Kessex attended, standing among the coalition officers who had come to pay their respects. 412 human crew members had died in the battle, and each one was honored individually. Captain Hawthorne stood at the podium reading names. The ritual seemed important to humans, acknowledging each loss, each sacrifice. In coalition tradition, they honored the fallen collectively, but humans needed to remember them one by one. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, age 34 engineer, died when Section 12 lost pressure. Hawthorne's voice remained steady. Ensign Marcus Webb, age 22, weapons technician, died at his post during the Helios firing sequence. The list went on and on. Kessex felt each name like a physical weight. These weren't just statistics. They were individuals who had walked the corridors of the Blackstar, who had laughed and worked and dreamed. Now they were gone. When the ceremony ended, Kessex found himself standing beside Admiral Thessa. She'd come personally from Coalition Command, along with several other high-ranking officers. They watched as human crew members filed past a wall where photos of the dead had been displayed. "I've reviewed the battle recordings 12 times, Thessa said quietly. "I still can't believe what I saw." "The tactics were reckless," said Commander Vex, who stood nearby, "flying directly into enemy fire, ramming an enemy dreadnought, detonating nuclear weapons in close proximity to their own ship. It's suicide." "It worked," observed General Torvik. The Ursinian warrior seemed impressed despite himself. "Brutal, yes, but effective." Ambassador Chen approached their group. She'd been on Tertius Prime during the battle, helping coordinate civilian evacuations. "Admiral, members of the Council, thank you for attending." "Ambassador," Thessa said, "we need to discuss what happened. Those weapons, those tactics, they're unlike anything we've seen. Your people fought with a ferocity that borders on—" She struggled for the word. "Savage?" Chen suggested. "I was going to say desperate." Chen smiled sadly. "We've always been desperate, Admiral. We're a young species on a hostile world. We evolved as persistence hunters. We couldn't outrun our prey, so we chased them until they collapsed from exhaustion. We couldn't survive alone, so we formed tribes and then nations and then a global civilization. Every step of our history has been a fight for survival." "But you've achieved peace on your world," Kona said. "Why maintain such aggressive military capabilities?" "Because peace is something you build and maintain," Chen replied. "On Earth we have a saying, peace through strength. We learned that lesson the hard way through centuries of conflict." Hawthorne joined them, still in her formal uniform. She looked exhausted. The past 3 days had been spent coordinating repairs while simultaneously dealing with inquiries from Coalition Command. "Captain," Thessa said formally, "on behalf of the Coalition, I want to express our gratitude. Your actions saved Tertius Prime and potentially changed the course of this war." "We did what needed to be done," Hawthorne replied. "The Krell are retreating from this sector," Vex added. "Intelligence suggests they're regrouping, analyzing what happened. They've never encountered tactics like yours." "They will again," Hawthorne said simply. Over the next 2 weeks, the Blackstar underwent repairs at a Coalition shipyard. Kessex spent much of that time aboard observing and learning. He'd requested a permanent assignment as liaison officer, and to his surprise, Hawthorne had agreed. "You might as well understand what you're getting into," she'd said. "This war is going to get worse before it gets better." She was right. Reports began flooding in from across Coalition space. The Krell were changing their tactics, responding to the threat humanity represented. They were spreading their fleets thinner, avoiding concentrated formations. They were developing new bioships with hardened neural networks less susceptible to EMP. They were learning. But so was the Coalition. Human weapons technology was being studied, adapted, integrated into Coalition doctrine. Factories on Tertius Prime had already begun producing human-designed kinetic weapons. Training programs were teaching Coalition officers about combined arms warfare, overwhelming firepower, and acceptable loss ratios. The last concept troubled many coalition species. Acceptable losses seemed like a contradiction. How could any death be acceptable? Kessex asked Hawthorne about this one day, as they stood in the ship's observation deck, watching repair crews work on the hull. "How do you decide?" he asked. "How do you calculate which losses are acceptable?" Hawthorne was quiet for a moment, watching sparks fly from a welding crew. "We don't calculate it coldly, if that's what you're asking. Every death matters. Every person we lose is someone's child, someone's friend, someone's loved one. Then how can you accept it? Because the alternative is worse." She turned to face him. "Kessex, in human history, we've faced choices where every option involved death. The question became, which choice leads to fewer deaths overall? If we retreat, more people die. If we surrender, entire populations are enslaved or exterminated. If we fight with restraint, the war drags on and millions more suffer. So you fight with everything you have," Kessex said slowly, beginning to understand. "We fight to end it," Hawthorne corrected. "There's a difference between escalating for the sake of violence and escalating to achieve victory. We learned that distinction through blood and fire." She pulled up a holographic display showing historical data from Earth. This was World War II, nearly 300 years ago. A global conflict involving most of our planet. It lasted 6 years and killed over 70 million people. Toward the end, we developed nuclear weapons, bombs using atomic fission. We used 2 of them on an enemy nation. Kessex saw the footage. Mushroom clouds rising over cities. Devastation beyond comprehension. "That's horrible." It was. Nearly 200,000 people died in those 2 attacks. But our military analysts estimated that invading that nation conventionally would have cost millions of lives, on both sides. The war might have lasted years longer, so we made a choice. End it now with terrible weapons or let it drag on with even more terrible consequences. "And you think that was the right choice?" "I think it was a human choice," Hawthorne said. "We don't fight clean wars, Kessex. We fight wars we can win, and then we try to never fight them again." An alert chimed on Hawthorne's datapad. She checked it, and her expression hardened. "Coalition Command is requesting our presence. Priority 1. They reached the communications room to find a tense conference in progress. Admiral Thessa's image filled the main screen, along with several other coalition leaders. "Captain Hawthorne, Officer Kessex, we have a situation," Thessa began. "Krell, forces have launched a major offensive in the Hadron sector. 20 systems are under attack simultaneously. They're overwhelming our defenses through sheer numbers." Tactical displays showed the scope of the assault. Red markers bloomed across the sector map like a disease spreading. "They've learned from Tertius Prime," Vex added. "They're staying dispersed, forcing us to split our forces. And they're targeting civilian populations specifically, trying to force quick surrenders." "How many ships do we have available?" Hawthorne asked. 37, Thessa admitted. "Against an estimated 800 Krell vessels." The numbers were devastating. Even with human weapons, those odds seemed impossible. "There's more," Thessa continued, and her voice carried a weight that made Kessex's wings flutter nervously. "We've intercepted Krell communications. They're specifically looking for the Blackstar. Their Empress has declared your ship her primary target. She's offering rewards to any Krell commander who destroys you." Hawthorne absorbed this information calmly. "So we've made them mad." "This isn't a joke, Captain," Vex snapped. "You've become a symbol. If the Krell destroy the Blackstar, they'll shatter coalition morale." "And if we win?" Hawthorne countered. "If you win," Thessa paused. "The psychological impact could be significant. The Krell have never obsessed over a single enemy vessel before. They're showing fear. If we can exploit that, then we should give them what they want," Hawthorne said. "Set up a trap. Make the Blackstar the bait." The coalition officers exchanged glances. General Torvik spoke up. "You're volunteering to be hunted?" "We're volunteering to win." Hawthorne pulled up her own tactical display. "The Krell are emotional now, angry, making this personal. That's a weakness we can exploit. What's the most valuable target in the Hadron sector?" "The Nexus Station," Kona replied. It's a trading hub, population 12 million. But it's also our primary communications relay for this entire region. If it falls, coordinating our defense becomes nearly impossible. Then that's where we go, Hawthorne decided. We make a show of defending the Nexus. Let the Krell commit forces to destroy us. And when they do, she looked at Admiral Thessa. How many ships can you hide nearby? A real fleet ready to strike? Thessa's antennae twitched as she considered. If we pull back from the other fronts, perhaps 100 ships, but we'd be gambling everything on this one engagement. War is gambling, Hawthorne said. The difference is knowing when to go all in. The plan was set. The Blackstar, still bearing scars from the previous battle, would travel to the Nexus station and take up a defensive position. Coalition forces would appear to abandon the sector, drawing Krell attention to the isolated human ship. Then, when the Krell committed their forces, the Coalition fleet would jump in from hyperspace and crush them. It was risky. It was dangerous. It was, Keswick's thought, very human. The journey to the Nexus took 3 days. Keswick spent much of that time in the ship's archives, reading about human military history. The more he learned, the more disturbed he became. Not by the violence itself, but by how methodical it was. Humans had studied warfare the way Coalition species studied art or philosophy. They'd developed theories, doctrines, entire academic fields dedicated to the science of conflict. One text particularly struck him. It was from an Earth military philosopher named Sun Tzu, who'd lived over 2,000 years ago. One passage read, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." Keswick found Hawthorne in the Combat Information Center and showed her the passage. "I don't understand. This says the best victory is won without battle, but you fight so aggressively." Hawthorne read the text and smiled. Sun Tzu also said, "When you engage in battle, if victory is protracted, weapons are blunted and morale depressed. When you besiege cities, your strength is exhausted. The point isn't to avoid fighting. It's to fight in a way that ends things quickly. So all this brutality is mercy," Hawthorne finished. "A quick, decisive war saves more lives than a prolonged conflict. That's why we hit hard, fast, and with overwhelming force. Not because we're cruel, but because we want it to be over." The Blackstar arrived at the Nexus station ahead of schedule. The massive orbital structure hung against the stars, a gleaming testament to Coalition engineering. Millions of people lived and worked there, unaware of the trap being set around them. Hawthorne positioned the Blackstar between the station and the most likely Krell approach vector. Then they waited. The Krell didn't keep them waiting long. Within 6 hours, sensors detected the approaching fleet. Not just a fleet, an armada. 200 ships with more arriving by the minute. "They really want us dead," commented the tactical officer. "Good," Hawthorne replied. "Let them commit. Communications, send the signal to Admiral Thessa. It's working." Keswick watched the displays as the Krell fleet formed up. 250 ships now, then 300. The trap was working. They were so focused on destroying the Blackstar that they were pouring forces into the sector. But something felt wrong. The numbers kept climbing. 350. 400. That was more than intelligence had suggested the Krell would commit. "Captain?" the sensor officer called out, voice tight with worry. "I'm reading additional hyperspace signatures. Multiple contacts emerging from—" "Oh no. Report," Hawthorne snapped. 600 contacts. 700. "Captain, they're bringing everything they have." Keswick felt his heart sink. This wasn't just an ambush, it was an execution. The Krell weren't being emotional or reckless. They were being smart. They were committing overwhelming force to guarantee the Blackstar's destruction. "Where's our support fleet?" Hawthorne demanded. "Coalition forces are 20 minutes away," Keswick reported, checking his datapad with trembling hands. "We don't have 20 minutes. Hawthorne stood, studying the tactical display. 700 Krell ships were now in system and more were arriving. The Coalition fleet, 100 strong, would be outnumbered 7-1 even if they arrived in time. The Krell fleet began to advance. They moved slowly, maintaining formation, not giving the Blackstar any opening to exploit. "All hands battle stations," Hawthorne announced. "This is going to be rough. Engineering, push the reactors to the red line. I want every weapon system at maximum capacity. Load everything we have." Keswick approached her station. "Captain, this isn't a battle. This is suicide." Hawthorne looked at him with those sharp green eyes. Officer Kessex, do you know what we learned from all our wars? We learned that sometimes the right choice isn't the one that lets you survive. Sometimes the right choice is the one that lets others survive. She touched her communications panel. Nexus Station, this is Captain Hawthorne. Begin immediate evacuation. All civilian transports are to depart the system. We'll buy you as much time as we can. The station administrator's voice crackled back. Captain, there are 12 million people here. We can't evacuate everyone in time. Then evacuate who you can, Hawthorne said firmly. And pray the coalition gets here fast. She turned to her crew. People, we all knew this was a possibility. The Krell want to destroy us. They want to break coalition morale. They want to prove that human tactics, human courage, human sacrifice means nothing. She paused. Let's show them they're wrong. The bridge crew responded with grim determination. No cheers, no bravado. Just professionals doing their jobs, knowing those jobs might be the last thing they ever did. The Krell fleet opened fire. 700 ships all targeting the Blackstar simultaneously. The universe turned to fire, and the Blackstar impossibly began to fight back. The first salvo from 700 Krell warships should have vaporized the Blackstar instantly. Energy beams converged on the human dreadnought from every angle, each one powerful enough to destroy a coalition frigate. The ship's ablative armor burned away in massive sheets, glowing white-hot as tons of protective material turned to plasma. But the Blackstar was built for this. Designed for this. The outer armor ablated exactly as intended, carrying away the heat. The second layer held. For now. Return fire, Hawthorne ordered calmly, as if they weren't surrounded by an overwhelming enemy force. All weapons full spread. Make them pay for every meter they advance. The Blackstar unleashed everything it had. Railguns hammered out tungsten rods at relativistic speeds. Missile tubes spewed forth nuclear-tipped warheads in a continuous stream. Point defense cannons created a sphere of protective fire around the ship. Laser batteries targeted incoming ordnance. Every weapon system operated at maximum capacity. Krell ships died. 1, then 3, then a dozen. But for every Krell vessel destroyed, 2 more pressed forward. The mathematics were brutal and simple. Even with superior weapons, even with better tactics, there were too many. Armor integrity at 40%, reported damage control. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Ceiling now. Kessex clung to a support rail as the ship shuddered from another barrage. Around him, the human crew worked with mechanical efficiency. No panic, no fear in their voices, just constant updates, damage reports, target acquisitions. How could they be so calm? Captain, coalition forces are 15 minutes out, the communications officer announced. We need to last 15 minutes, Hawthorne said to herself. Then louder, Helm, evasive pattern Delta. Use the station's gravity well for cover. Make them work for their shots. The Blackstar banked, its massive bulk moving with surprising agility. They dove toward the Nexus Station, using the orbital structure as a shield. Krell fire struck the station's shields, causing them to flicker and fail in sections. Civilian transports were still evacuating, streaming away from the station in desperate flights. How many evacuated? Hawthorne asked. 3 million so far, Kessex reported, checking the station's transmissions. 9 million still aboard, not enough time. They'd never evacuate everyone before the station fell. A proximity alarm shrieked. 6 Krell biocruisers had broken from the main formation, circling to flank the Blackstar. Their organic hulls pulsed with bioluminescence as they prepared to fire at close range. Boarding action, Tactical warned. They're trying to latch onto our hull. Hawthorne's expression hardened. Security teams to the breach points. Vent affected sections if necessary. They don't get aboard my ship. Kessex had seen recordings of Krell boarding tactics. They used bioengineered warriors, massive creatures with armor-like carapaces and appendages that could tear through metal. Coalition forces typically retreated from sections being boarded, sealing them off and hoping for rescue. But when the Krell breaching pods latched onto the Blackstar's hull and began burning through, they encountered something they'd never faced before: human Marines. The boarding action lasted 11 minutes. The humans didn't retreat. They met the Krell warriors in the narrow corridors with weapons that seemed primitive: chemically propelled projectiles, explosive devices, even close combat weapons like blades. But the ferocity of the defense was unlike anything in Krell experience. Humans didn't just fight, they counterattacked. When Krell warriors broke through into a corridor, human troops threw explosive devices into their midst. then charged through the smoke to finish survivors. When the fighting was over, all 6 breaching pods had been destroyed, their Krell occupants dead. But the cost was high, 73 human casualties in those 11 minutes. Boarding threat neutralized, the security chief reported, his voice hoarse. We held them. Good work, Hawthorne said. Then, without missing a beat, Tactical Fire Plan Gamma. Target their command ships. The battle raged on. The Blackstar fought like a cornered predator, wounded, bleeding, but still dangerous. Every weapon that could fire did fire. When one railgun overheated and failed, another took its place. When missile tubes ran dry, the crew manually loaded more. The ship was coming apart around them, entire sections venting to space, casualties mounting by the minute. And still it fought. Kessex watched the casualty counter climb. 500 dead, 800. 1,000. The numbers became meaningless, just data on a screen. But each number represented a person, someone who'd stood at their post, done their duty, and died for it. Coalition fleet arriving in 3 minutes, communications announced. We might actually make it, the tactical officer said, surprise evident in her voice. That's when the sensors detected something new, something massive emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. Contact, the sensor officer called out. Mass reading is... That can't be right. Report, Hawthorne demanded. Captain, it's bigger than a moon. It's... alive. Biological readings are off the scale. The view screen automatically adjusted and Kessex felt his blood freeze. The thing that emerged from hyperspace was beyond comprehension. It was organic, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. It had a mouth, if that was the right word, large enough to swallow entire ships. Tentacles that stretched for kilometers, and it was moving toward the Nexus station. What is that? Kessex whispered. Krell planet killer, Hawthorne said grimly. We've seen them in intelligence reports. Bioengineered creatures that consume worlds. They've only deployed 3 in this entire war. Can we stop it? Not with what we have left. Hawthorne pulled up what remained of their weapons inventory. Most systems were damaged or depleted. They had maybe 5 minutes of combat capability left before the Blackstar became a floating wreck. The Coalition fleet burst from hyperspace right on schedule. 100 ships, the largest force the Coalition had assembled in months. They immediately engaged the Krell Armada, and the space around the Nexus became a maelstrom of fire and death. But the planet killer ignored them all. It moved toward the station with terrible purpose, its maw opening wider. 9 million people were still aboard that station. 9 million lives about to be consumed. Admiral Thessa's voice came over the command frequency. All ships concentrate fire on the planet killer. We have to stop it! The Coalition fleet tried. Energy weapons, antimatter torpedoes, every advanced weapon in their arsenal struck the creature's hide. And it simply regenerated. Its bioorganic structure could repair damage faster than they could inflict it. It's not working, Vex reported, desperation creeping into his usually calm voice. We can't penetrate deep enough to reach vital organs. Hawthorne stood at her command station, studying the tactical display. Kessex could see her mind working, calculating. The Blackstar had maybe enough power left for one more major action. One final strike. Helm, Hawthorne said quietly. Plot an intercept course with that thing. Maximum speed. Captain? The helmsman turned to look at her. You heard me. We're going in. Elizabeth. Ambassador Chen's voice cut in over a separate channel. She'd been monitoring from Earth. You can't be serious. Even if you reach it, your weapons can't. We're not using weapons, Hawthorne interrupted. Engineering, can we overload the reactor? There was a pause. Then the chief engineer's voice. Captain, if we overload the reactor core and detonate every remaining warhead in our magazine simultaneously, you're talking about a 500 gigaton yield. Will it be enough? Another pause. If detonated inside the creature, it might overwhelm its regenerative capacity. But Captain, we'd have to be inside its mouth when we detonate. Then that's what we'll do. Hawthorne opened a ship-wide channel. All hands, this is the captain. In approximately 7 minutes, we're going to fly into that planet killer's maw and detonate the ship. This is a one-way trip. Any crew members who wish to evacuate should report to the escape pods immediately. You have 5 minutes. Silence fell over the bridge. No one moved. Captain, the helmsman finally said. With respect, where exactly are we supposed to evacuate to? The Krell fleet is still out there. We'd be picked off before we could reach safety. Then it settled, Hawthorne said. Helm, set your course. Engineering, start the overload sequence. Let's make this count. Kessex felt his heart's racing. This was insane. This was suicide. This was exactly what humans did. Captain, he said, his translator struggling to convey the emotion in his voice. Why? Why sacrifice yourself like this? Hawthorne looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw something that transcended species. Not resignation, not despair. Determination. Because 9 million people are on that station, she said simply. And we have the power to save them. That makes it our responsibility. She turned to her crew. I'm proud of every one of you. If there's an afterlife, we'll have one hell of a story to tell. If there isn't, she smiled, then we'll go out making the biggest explosion in galactic history. The crew responded with grim humor and final preparations. The Blackstar turned, disengaging from the Krell fleet, and accelerated toward the planet killer. The massive creature seemed to notice them, tentacles reaching out, but the human ship dodged and weaved, using every last bit of maneuverability it had. Coalition fleet, clear the blast radius, Hawthorne transmitted. This is going to get messy. Captain, you don't have to do this, Thessa pleaded. We can find another way. There is no other way, Hawthorne replied. And Admiral, when this is over, build more ships like the Blackstar. Teach your people what we taught you. Win this damn war. We will, Thessa promised. I swear it. The Blackstar entered the planet killer's engagement range. Organic weapons, bioplasma projectors, acid sprays, things that defied easy classification, struck the ship. What little armor remained burned away. Hull plating buckled. Internal systems failed across multiple decks. But the ship kept coming. Reactor overload at 90%, engineering reported. All warheads armed and slaved to the primary detonation sequence. Distance to target? Hawthorne asked. 500 meters. 400. 300. The planet killer's maw opened wider as if to welcome its prey. The Blackstar flew directly into it, past the ring of teeth-like structures into the creature's massive throat. Kessex saw the internal walls of the creature closing around them, pulsing with organic life. Digestive acids began eating at the hull. The ship groaned as pressure built from all sides. Now, Hawthorne said simply. The chief engineer pressed the final authorization code. Reactor overload at 100%. Detonation in 3, 2, 1. On the bridge of her flagship, Admiral Thessa watched in horror and awe as the planet killer suddenly bulged from within. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then light, brilliant, terrible light, erupted from inside the creature. The explosion was visible from half a system away, 500 gigatons of destructive force detonating inside the planet killer's body. The creature didn't just die, it disintegrated. The shockwave pulverized organic tissue. Vaporized fluids tore apart the structural integrity. The planet killer came apart in massive chunks, each piece tumbling through space, lifeless. The Blackstar was gone, vaporized in the same explosion that destroyed its target. The Krell fleet, witnessing the destruction of their ultimate weapon and the death of the ship they'd feared most, began to retreat. The coalition forces, emboldened and enraged by the sacrifice they'd witnessed, pursued without mercy. The battle of the Nexus station was over. The coalition had won, but the victory tasted like ashes. Back on Earth in the command center of United Earth Forces, Ambassador Chen stood at a window overlooking the blue planet below. She'd watched the Blackstar's final moments on the tactical feed. She'd heard Hawthorne's last transmission. Behind her, the Secretary General of Earth's government approached. Ambassador, we've received word from Coalition Command. The Blackstar is gone. All hands lost. Chen didn't turn around. How many did they save? 9 million people on the Nexus station. Countless others who would have died if the Krell fleet hadn't been broken. The Coalition is calling it the turning point of the war. Elizabeth knew, Chen said quietly. She knew what it would cost. They all did? There's something else, the Secretary General continued. Krell communication intercepts indicate that their Empress is furious. She's calling the Blackstar's destruction a symbol of human weakness. She's mobilizing a grand armada, over 2,000 ships. And their target, he paused, is Earth. Chen finally turned around. They're coming here? To our homeworld? Intelligence suggests they want to destroy humanity before we can build more ships like the Blackstar. They see us as a threat now. A genuine threat. Chen walked to the strategic display showing Earth and its solar system. Have we informed Coalition Command? Yes, Admiral Thessa is offering to send evacuation support. She says they'll hold the Krell at the outer colonies as long as possible. Give us time to evacuate the civilian population. What did you tell her? I told her we'd give our answer in an hour. The Secretary General studied Chen's expression. Ambassador, be realistic. We have 5 operational warships, none as powerful as the Blackstar. Against 2,000 Krell vessels, we don't stand a chance. We should evacuate while we can. Chen looked at Earth through the window, the blue oceans, the white clouds, the continents where billions of humans lived and worked and dreamed. Home. Contact Admiral Thessa, she said firmly. Tell her we appreciate the offer, but we're not evacuating. What? Maria, that's suicide. Is it? Chen smiled, and there was something fierce in that expression. The Krell made a mistake. They think they know what humans are capable of because they destroyed one ship. They think they've seen our best. She turned to face him fully. They haven't seen anything yet. We can't possibly defend against 2,000 ships. Alone, no, but we're not alone. We have 4.7 billion people on Earth, 600 million in the Mars colonies, 300 million in the asteroid settlements. We have orbital platforms, defense satellites, weapons we've been building since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. Chen's voice grew stronger. The Krell are bringing the fight to us, to our home, and they're about to learn something important. What's that? That when you back a predator into a corner, it doesn't run. Chen pulled up the defense grid for Earth's solar system. It bares its teeth. Contact Coalition Command. Tell them the Krell are welcome to try, and start activating every defense system in Seoul. Every single one. Maria, even with all our defenses, the Krell think they've broken us, Chen interrupted. They think destroying the Blackstar proved we can't stand against them. They're about to find out why every human war, every human battle, every human sacrifice throughout our history was just practice. She looked at Earth again. They're about to find out what happens when you attack a human homeworld. The Secretary General studied her expression and saw the same determination that Captain Hawthorne had shown in her final moments, the same resolve that had carried humanity through every trial in its violent history. God help them, he whispered. God won't, Chen replied. But we will. The word went out across human space. The Krell were coming. Every colony activated its defense systems. Every orbital platform loaded its weapons. Every ship capable of fighting was recalled to Seoul. And on Earth, in bunkers and command centers and military bases across the planet, humanity prepared for the largest battle it had ever fought. The Blackstar was gone, but its spirit lived on, and the Krell Grand Armada, assembled with such confidence, began its journey to Earth, unaware they were flying toward something far more dangerous than any single ship. They were flying toward humanity's homeworld. They were flying toward humanity's anger, and they had no idea what was waiting for them. The Krell Grand Armada arrived at Earth's solar system with the confidence of inevitable victory. 2,100 warships strong, it was the largest single fleet the Krell Dominion had ever assembled. Their Empress had promised them an easy conquest, one primitive world, defended by a species too young to understand real warfare. They emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system, their bioships pulsing with anticipation. Scouts spread out mapping the defenses. What they found should have been a warning. Earth's solar system wasn't just defended, it was a fortress. Krell Fleet Commander Vraktis studied the sensor data with growing unease. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had been militarized. Every significant rock held weapons platforms or mining facilities that could be converted to weapons. Mars itself bristled with orbital defense stations. The moon had been transformed into something the Krell had never seen before. A massive weapons battery, its surface dotted with railgun installations. And Earth. Earth was surrounded by a network of satellites, platforms, and defensive positions so dense it looked like a technological sphere around the planet. They've fortified their entire system, Vraktis reported to the Empress via long-range communication. This isn't a colony world. This is a military installation. Because they've lived in fear their entire existence, the Empress replied, her translated voice dripping with contempt. They're a paranoid species jumping at shadows. Press the attack. Show them what real power looks like. The Grand Armada advanced, 2,000 ships against one system. The mathematics seemed simple. On Earth, in the unified command center buried beneath the Rocky Mountains, Ambassador Chen watched the Krell fleet approach. Around her, military commanders from every nation on Earth monitored their sections of the defense grid. Krell fleet has crossed the heliopause, announced the sensor chief. Estimate 24 hours until they reach Mars orbit. Good, Chen said calmly. That gives us time. Status of our forces? All orbital platforms operational, reported Admiral Martinez of the Earth Defense Fleet. Moon batteries are charged and ready. Mars colonies have evacuated civilians to underground shelters. The asteroid belt defense network is online. How many ships do we have? 8 operational warships. 3 are Blackstar-class vessels. They're ready for deployment? Chen felt a pang at that. 3 new ships bearing the name of the one they'd lost. The shipyards had worked miracles to complete them in time, but they were still under-trained crews on new vessels. Still, they were human. They'd adapt. What about coalition support? Someone asked. Admiral Thessa has dispatched a relief fleet, Chen replied, but they're 4 days away. We're on our own for this fight. The room fell silent. 8 human ships against 2,000 Krell warships. The odds were worse than suicidal. Then we'd better make those 4 days count, Martinez said grimly. Give the order. Activate all defensive measures. It's time to show them what happens when you attack Earth. The Krell fleet's first indication that something was wrong came when they reached the orbit of Uranus. Long-range weapons from hidden platforms in the outer system opened fire. Kinetic projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds. Nuclear-tipped missiles that had been waiting in cold orbit for weeks. The barrage destroyed 12 Krell ships before they even realized they were under attack. They have weapons this far out? Vractus was genuinely surprised. Who fortifies the outer reaches of their system? Humans who have been expecting invasion for 300 years, his tactical officer replied. As the Grand Armada advanced, it became clear that every astronomical unit of space was contested. The humans had built defenses everywhere. Drones hiding in Saturn's rings, missile platforms disguised as asteroids, automated defense systems that activated as the Krell passed. It was death by 1,000 cuts, each cut small but adding up. By the time the Krell fleet reached Jupiter, they'd lost 47 ships. Not enough to stop them, but enough to make them cautious. This is taking too long, Vractus complained. We're supposed to overwhelm them, not fight for every meter of space. That's when the human ships finally appeared. They came from 3 directions, emerging from Jupiter's magnetic shadow where sensors had been partially blinded. 8 vessels against 2,000. The Krell sensors identified 3 as Blackstar-class dreadnoughts, similar to the ship they'd destroyed at the Nexus. The others were smaller, cruisers and frigates. The Krell fleet should have laughed at such hopeless odds. Instead, they remembered what one Blackstar had done at Tertius Prime. They remembered how it had fought, how it had bled them. Engage with overwhelming force, Vractus ordered. I want those ships destroyed now. 400 Krell vessels broke formation to intercept the human ships. The humans didn't retreat. Instead, they did something unexpected. They split up. The 3 Blackstar-class dreadnoughts each took a different vector, drawing Krell forces apart. The smaller human ships worked in coordinated pairs, using hit-and-run tactics. And suddenly the Krell weren't fighting one battle. They were fighting 8 simultaneous engagements across a massive volume of space. The USS Blackstar II, commanded by Captain James Rodriguez, demonstrated the lessons learned from its predecessor's sacrifice. It didn't charge into the enemy formation. Instead, it used Jupiter's gravity well for constant maneuvering, never presenting a stationary target. Railguns fired continuously, each shot precisely calculated. Missile spreads forced the Krell to disperse, and when Krell ships tried to close distance, the Blackstar II would pivot and hit them with its spinal-mounted directed energy weapons. The human ships fought a running battle, slowly falling back toward Mars. They were losing. 1 frigate destroyed, a cruiser badly damaged, but they were buying time. Every hour they held the Krell attention was another hour for Earth's defenses to prepare. Kessex watched the battle from aboard Admiral Thessa's flagship, racing toward Earth at maximum speed. The Coalition relief fleet was still 3 days away, but they could monitor human transmissions. They're not trying to win, Kessex realized. They're trying to delay. Buying time for Earth, Thessa agreed. but at such cost. Look at those casualty figures, the numbers were staggering. Human ships were trading losses at a rate that would bankrupt any coalition fleet's morale. But the humans kept fighting. When one weapon system failed, they switched to another. When hull sections breached, they sealed them and kept firing from remaining positions. They fight like their world depends on it, General Torvik observed. Because it does, Keswick said quietly. The Krell Grand Armada finally reached Mars after 36 hours of constant fighting. They'd lost 230 ships to the running battle, and the countless automated defenses scattered throughout the system. They were angry, frustrated, and eager to end this. Mars orbit was where humanity showed them what true defensive warfare looked like. The Mars colonies had been building for this moment since humans first arrived on the Red Planet. Orbital defense platforms, each one a miniature fortress, created an interlocking network of fire. The human warships, battered but still functional, took positions within this network. When the Krell fleet attacked, they ran into a buzzsaw. The defense platforms weren't mobile, but they didn't need to be. Each one had multiple weapon systems, redundant power supplies, and overlapping fields of fire. The Krell couldn't flank them because there was always another platform covering that angle. They couldn't overwhelm any single position without exposing themselves to fire from 3 others. And the platforms were drones. No crew to be killed, no morale to break. They simply fought until destroyed, and when one fell, its weapons were automatically taken over by neighboring platforms. The Battle of Mars orbit lasted 14 hours. When it was over, the Krell had broken through, but at horrific cost. 500 more ships destroyed. The remaining human warships, too damaged to continue fighting, retreated to Earth for repairs. But the Krell had won. They'd defeated the outer defenses. Now only Earth itself remained. Fleet Commander Vraktis stared at his casualty reports. 730 ships lost out of 2,100. Over 1/3 of the Grand Armada, destroyed fighting through a single star system. And they hadn't even reached the main target yet. The Empress will not be pleased, his second-in-command observed. The Empress isn't here, Vraktis snapped. She doesn't see what we're facing. These humans, they've been preparing for this their entire existence. Every moon, every asteroid, every orbit, it's all weaponized. But we've won. Earth is defenseless now, is it? Vraktis looked at the sensor readings of Earth's orbital space. Hundreds of defense satellites, dozens of battle stations, the moon, its surface covered in what appeared to be enormous weapons. No, I don't think it is. He was right to be worried. As the Krell fleet approached Earth, they finally saw the full scope of what they faced. Earth didn't have shields around it like a coalition world. Instead, it had layers. The first layer was in high orbit, weapons platforms and satellites in a dense network. The second layer was in low orbit, battle stations the size of small cities, each one bristling with weapons. The third layer was the moon itself turned into a fortress. And the fourth layer, what are those? A Krell sensor operator asked, pointing at the display. Thousands of small contacts moving in coordinated swarms. Drones, each one carrying weapons ranging from missiles to kinetic kill vehicles. They moved like schools of fish, impossible to target effectively because destroying one accomplished nothing. Deploy all forces, Vraktis ordered, resignation in his voice. Let's finish this. The Battle of Earth began at dawn, Earth Standard Time. 5 billion people on the planet below looked up to see the sky turn into a light show of explosions and weapons fire. The Krell fleet attacked in waves, trying to overwhelm the defenses through sheer numbers, but every wave crashed against prepared positions. The orbital platforms fired their kinetic weapons, sending solid slugs at velocities that made them as destructive as nuclear weapons. The battle stations coordinated their fire, creating kill zones that no ship could survive. The drone swarms harassed and distracted, forcing the Krell to waste ammunition on insignificant targets. And then the moon opened fire. The installations on the lunar surface were railguns on a scale never before seen. They didn't fire small projectiles, they fired projectiles massing hundreds of tons, accelerated by kilometers-long magnetic coils. When these projectiles struck Krell bioships, they punched completely through, the kinetic energy creating shockwaves that rippled through organic tissue, tearing apart internal structures. This is impossible. Vraktis watched another wave of ships die. How can one species have this much firepower? Because they've been afraid of us since before they knew we existed, his tactical officer replied. They built all of this preparing for something like this. were just the enemy they imagined. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Krell pushed forward, taking losses but making progress. They destroyed half the orbital platforms. Several battle stations had been reduced to debris. The moon batteries were firing less frequently, either damaged or conserving ammunition. Fractus saw victory within reach. They could break through. They could bombard Earth into submission. The cost had been terrible, only 800. Ships remained of the original 2,000, but they could still win. That's when the sensors detected new contacts emerging from the Earth-Moon Lagrange points. Ships, human ships. Not 8 this time. Dozens of them, each one a Blackstar-class dreadnought or something similar. Where did they come from? Fractus demanded. They must have been hidden in those stable orbital points using stealth technology we couldn't detect. And there are more emerging from behind the moon. Admiral, we're reading over 70 human warships. Fractus felt something he'd never experienced in his military career. Fear. The USS Blackstar III led the charge. Its sister ships followed. Fresh crews, undamaged hulls, full magazines. They'd been waiting, hidden, for the exact moment when the Krell fleet was most committed, most vulnerable. Ambassador Chen had been right. The Krell had made a mistake. They'd thought they'd seen humanity's best at the Nexus station. They'd been wrong. The human ships tore into the Krell formation with coordinated precision. They didn't fight like desperate defenders now. They fought like apex predators who'd lured their prey into a trap. Every tactic learned through centuries of warfare, every lesson bought with blood, every strategy developed through generations of conflict, it all came together in this moment. The Krell fleet broke. For the first time in the war, a Krell armada turned and retreated. They'd come to destroy humanity, and instead, humanity had destroyed them. Of the 2,100 ships that had entered Earth's solar system, fewer than 200 escaped. The Battle of Earth was over. On the bridge of her flagship, now finally arriving in Sol system, Admiral Thessa watched the aftermath in stunned silence. Debris from thousands of ships orbited Earth like a new asteroid belt. The human defense systems, battered but operational, maintained their positions. And the new human warships, so many of them, moved through the wreckage searching for survivors to rescue. They won, Thessa said, unable to quite believe it. Against odds that would have destroyed any coalition world, they won. The Krell won't recover from this, Vex observed. They've lost their Grand Armada. The psychological impact will be enormous. Kessex looked at Earth through the viewport. That small blue world had just changed the course of galactic history. What do we do now? Now? Thessa turned to him. Now we learn how they built those defenses, how they trained those crews, how they fought with such coordination, and then we take that knowledge and we finish this war. The transmission came from Earth, Ambassador Chen requesting a conference. When her image appeared, she looked exhausted but triumphant. Admiral Thessa, Chen said. Thank you for coming. Though as you can see, we managed without you. Ambassador, what I just witnessed, Thessa struggled for words. Your people's capacity for warfare is beyond anything we imagined. The preparations, the weapons, the tactics. We've had a lot of practice, Chen replied. And we've been expecting something like this since we first looked at the stars. Our entire civilization is built on one assumption. Someday, someone or something will try to destroy us. We prepared accordingly. The Krell won't stop, Vex warned. This defeat will enrage them. Good, Chen said firmly. Let them be angry. Let them throw everything they have at us. We'll be ready. And in the meantime, she gestured off-screen, and the view shifted to show shipyards in Earth orbit. Dozens of new vessels under construction, each one a warship. We're building a fleet, not just for defense, for offense. You want to take the fight to them, Thessa realized. We want to end this war, Chen corrected. The Coalition has been playing defense for 47 years. That's 47 years too long. It's time to stop reacting and start acting. She leaned forward. Admiral, how many worlds has the Krell conquered? Over 400 systems. Trillions of beings enslaved or killed. Then we have 400 systems to liberate, Chen said. And we have the weapons, the tactics, and the will to do it. The question is, does the Coalition? The question hung in the air. For decades, the Coalition had fought to preserve what they had, to minimize losses, to survive. The idea of actually winning, of taking the war to the enemy and ending it, seemed almost foreign. But humanity had just proven it was possible. One species, one star system, defeating an armada that should have been unstoppable. We do, Thessa said finally. Yes, we do. 6 months later, Keswick stood at the memorial on Tertius Prime. The monument had been expanded. It now honored not just the original Blackstar crew, but all those who'd fallen in the Battle of Earth. Human and coalition names alike, etched in stone that would stand for centuries. The war had turned. Using human tactics and weapons, the coalition had gone on the offensive. System after system was being liberated. The Krell, facing an enemy that fought with coordination and determination they'd never encountered, were being pushed back. Keswick heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see a young human woman in a military uniform standing at attention. Her name tag read Hawthorne. Are you? Keswick began. Lieutenant Sarah Hawthorne, she confirmed. Captain Elizabeth Hawthorne was my mother. I'm sorry for your loss. She was remarkable. She was, Sarah agreed. She looked at her mother's name on the memorial. But she'd tell you the victory didn't come from any one person. It came from everyone who stood their ground when it mattered. Everyone who understood that sometimes the right choice isn't survival. It's protecting others so they can survive. Is that why you joined the military? Partly, but also because the war isn't over. The Krell are being beaten, but they're not defeated. It might take years to finish this. And you're ready for that? Sarah smiled, and Keswick saw her mother in that expression, determined, fierce, unbreakable. My whole species has been ready for this since we first evolved. We're just glad we finally have a cause worth fighting for. They stood together in silence, watching as more people arrived to pay their respects. Coalition citizens and humans, standing side by side, remembering those who died so others could live. In orbit above, new ships moved through space. The USS Blackstar 4 was among them, leading a mixed fleet of human and coalition vessels toward the front lines. The Krell would learn again what humanity had been teaching them, that compassion and mercy were strengths, not weaknesses. But when pushed, humans would bring fire enough to burn down entire empires. The memorial stone caught the light, and Keswick read the inscription that had been added after the Battle of Earth. It was a quote from an old Earth military leader, chosen by Ambassador Chen herself. When you have to kill a man, it costs nothing to be polite. But beneath that, in smaller letters, was the real message, the one that captured what humanity had taught the galaxy. We didn't want this war, but we'll finish it. And across known space, on worlds being liberated from Krell control, people looked to the stars with new hope, because humanity had entered the war, bringing with it flames that consumed everything standing between civilization and freedom. The USS Blackstar was gone, but its legacy burned bright, and in that fire a galaxy was being reforged.